Hey guys, how's it going? So here I'm going to give you guys a little tutorial about how to prep your duck, get it ready, put some seasoning on it, and then we're going to do a little stuff with it with some orange. So a couple of necessities that you guys need set up right away is a little bit of spices. So you don't have to have a ton of spices to make a good rub. Simple things, some salt, pepper, I've got a little paprika to add some color to it, and then fennel seed and some Chinese 5-spice. Real simple, real easy. And then for a little bit of a rub and a stuffing on the inside, we're going to use a whole navel orange. We have here some pure orange marmalade and then some ginger. You can just use ginger paste, that's totally fine. You can also go and grate a ginger if you really feel like it. This is the easiest way, and I know everyone's kind of limited on supplies right now. So what I like to do is I like to put all my spices into a bowl first and mix it up. That way I'm not going to touch all my spices, then touch my poultry, then touch my spices again. You gotta think about cross-contamination. And then I got another bowl here that I'm gonna use for the stuffing and for when I put all my wet ingredients together, try and separate your dry and your wet ingredients. Another couple things that would be good to have is having a small knife. I'm gonna show you guys why that's important, as well as I'm gonna teach you guys how to truss a duck. Yeah, so we're gonna get started on this. I've got my duck here all ready to go. It is thawed. You can get a fresh duck, you can get a frozen duck, but make sure by the time you're ready to season it and brine it or glaze it and put it on the barbecue, it needs to be fully thawed. If you have any frozen bits inside, it's not gonna cook evenly, and then you're gonna have raw bits of poultry, and that's not what you wanna do. Okay, so we're gonna get started on this. I'm going to first score the breast with the knife. What this does is this is gonna allow some of the fats to release, as well as it's gonna allow some of that dry rub to penetrate through that skin and get right into the duck. So when you're gonna score your poultry, it's real simple. All you're gonna do is you're gonna do a crosshatch pattern every inch or so across the breast and the skinned area of the poultry. Now what you wanna do is make sure that all the insides are cleaned out first and that you've given it a good rinse to make sure that it's not sitting in any juices. So I'm gonna start, I wanna go across the largest part first because that's gonna be your biggest section. You don't wanna start in the corner because you end up getting a very sloppy score. So with a nice sharp knife, just a tip across the breast, you just wanna lance the skin. And again, the other way. Now this doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to release some of those fats and get the seasoning in. So again, I'm gonna flip it over and do the same with the other side. And crosshatch. Now be careful when you're doing this, don't slip and cut yourself. Perfect. And there we have it. Our duck is scored and ready for dry rub. All right guys, so for a dry rub, I like to use a bowl. That way I can mix all my ingredients first and make sure it's evenly coated. If you just salt and pepper different things, it usually doesn't come out as an even coating, and you have bits that are saltier or pepperier. Or in this case, when we have 5-spice and paprika, you're gonna end up with a lot of flavor in one spot and not in the other. So a real good base for any seasoning is salt. I like to use sea salt. You can use any salt, kosher salt, table salt, whatever. So what you're doing is you're gonna put enough in the bowl that you make sure you can get a full coverage on this duck. So it might seem like a lot, but you gotta think that you're spreading it around everywhere. Next, I'm gonna add a little bit of pepper. Because I don't want big pepper chunks on this, I'm gonna turn the dial to a fine grind because I don't need to have big chunks messing with the flavor. So I'm not going to go heavy on the pepper here. Usually I would do a lot more, but because of the flavor profile that I want in here, it's going to go a little lighter. Okay, now we're going to add some paprika. So this is just for some color, so I'm just going to add a little bit to give it a nice reddish orange hue. Next, we have some fennel seed. Not everyone likes fennel seed. Some people think fennel tastes like black licorice and they're not a fan of it, but I do like fennel, so I'm gonna add it. Now these are a little larger chunks, so as it goes on, some of it will brush off. It doesn't stick quite like the powder, like all the rest of these, but that's why we scored the duck, and it'll go inside those little flavor pockets. Next is 5 spice. You're gonna have to be a little careful with this. There are quite a few flavors in here, 5, just like the name. And it is a bit of a sweeter kind of a flavor, but it does have a little kick to it. So be cautious of how much you use. I like this flavor, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. All right. So now we're gonna mix this up. Nothing fancy. So it's not a huge amount of seasoning, but we're also gonna alter the flavor with some stuffing, with a glaze, and with some wet ingredients. So this is just gonna be enough to coat the whole duck and give it that nice internal flavor. All right, now that we got our dry rub all made up, we're gonna put it on top of the duck. So the rule of thumb that I like to follow is usually you wanna marinate or season your important parts first, breast, back, legs, and then work yourself to the little wings and the little drumsticks near the end. So it's all mixed up. I like to kind of sprinkle it over top, and we're gonna give it a rub in after, but I just wanna kind of portion out where everything's gonna go. If you ended up not mixing enough seasoning, that's okay. You can make some more again. Just try and remember the same ratios that you used. And make sure that if you touch the poultry, always wash your hands before you go back to your seasoning. So we're gonna give this a rub. As you can see, it's gonna get all inside of that scored pocket, inside the skin. Don't rub too hard because you don't want to tear all that skin. You want it to stay mostly intact. What's going to happen when we barbecue that later is it's going to crisp up and hold in all that moisture. Okay, now that we're finished with this one side, I'm going to flip it over. And we're going to do the same with the other side. Try and get as even of covering as you can. It's not going to be perfect, but just do your best. All right, now we have both sides seasoned. This duck is ready for glazing. All right, so next up, guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a little bit of our stuffing and our glaze. So what we have here is we have some orange marmalade, some ginger. I'm just gonna use the paste version because it's easier. Then we have a whole navel orange, and we have some French brandy. Now you don't need to go super expensive with your brandy because all we're going to do is use it as a glaze, so you can go get some cheap stuff. So first what I'm going to do is, what I really want to do is I want to stuff the duck with this whole orange. Doesn't matter how you cut it. Just want to make it in half, that way it'll slide right in. I am going to take some of the juices though, and I'm going to squeeze it into this bowl to go with my other mixes. Perfect, so there's some orange juice in there. It doesn't have to be squeezed totally because I want to keep some of the juice in here so that as it smokes and cooks, it slowly releases and adds flavor inside of the duck, as well as helps keep the moisture content. So those are going to set off to the side. And then next I'm going to add my ginger paste. Just want a little bit. Too much ginger and that'll ruin the flavor of your duck. Too little and you probably won't notice it. So now we're going to spoon out a little bit of our marmalade. Probably just 1 spoonful is good. And then next, add some more little brandy. Just a little bit. So now we're going to mix these guys up. Now I'm using a spoon because I don't want to dirty more dishes than I have to. You can scoop the marmalade, mix it, and then I'm just going to ladle this on top and inside of the duck itself. Now, if you can smell too much ginger, it's because you added too much. The predominant smell you want here is that orange. You want a nice, zesty, sweet citrus smell with a hint of the ginger to accent, and of course, some booze. So we've got our mix here. It's pretty much all mixed up. There's no hard clumps or large bits. That's going to be perfect. Let's stuff this duck. So first step, I'm going to put the glaze inside, then I'm going to stuff the orange, and we'll reglaze the outside. So I just want to get a couple of spoonfuls in. Get it inside the cavity, and you'll rub it around a little bit. This is like a pre-seasoning for the inside, then you'll stuff and glaze the outside. So make sure there's no stickers on your oranges. Get it right on all the way to the end. And I use this one in here. I want to put it with the round side out to kind of act as a bit of a plug to make sure none of those juices come out. Perfect. Just like that. Next, I'm going to brush the glaze over the top. Don't forget the wings. That is all ready to go. Alright guys, so the last thing we're going to do before we put this thing on the barbecue is we're going to do what's called a truss. So all a truss is you're going to use some butcher twine and you're going to tie the duck to make sure that it stays nice and tight, and that if you flip it, it's not going to lose any juices anywhere. The limbs aren't going to go everywhere. You're just keeping a nice tight unit to be able to put on that barbecue and manage easily. So all you're going to need for this is probably about an arm's length of twine. You don't want to keep this attached to the roll because it's going to have poultry all over it and you don't want to cross-contaminate. So usually an arm length is good. Now I'm taller than most people, but I make a lot of mistakes. So you want to do a string across the breast and the wings and another string across the feet. It's up to you whether you want to do one down the center of the sternum. That's all preference and a little bit of aesthetics. So it is a bit more difficult to do it while it's in the pan as opposed to sitting on a cutting board. However, you really want to keep all the mess in one spot. You don't want this going all over your counter. Less cleanup, much better. Trust me, I'm an expert. Simple little butcher's knot. Now you want to do this kind of in the middle of the thigh, not too low and not too high, otherwise it'll kind of slip off. Cross the feet to make sure that all stays intact. Just cinch it like so. Perfect. So like I said, there's a little bit extra, but I'd rather waste a little bit like this than have to waste the whole roll of butcher's twine, or even better yet, have to try and wash the whole roll of butcher's twine. All right, so here we go. We've got ourselves a duck, seasoned, stuffed, and trussed. So this is all ready for the charcoal. We're gonna let this sit in the fridge for a couple hours, and then we're gonna put it on. Okay guys, now how to prep your barbecue. So I like to always make sure that my charcoal is kept somewhere nice and dry. So I always keep a Tupperware container to make sure that none of it gets wet. So what you want to do is we want to start with building ourselves a little mound of charcoal, and we're going to light that. We need our barbecue to get up to temperature before we put any meat on. So the proper setup for this thing is you're going to want to put yourself in a little teepee almost. What I want to do here is I want to make sure that my vent here opens and closes. That'll control how much air is coming in. What I want to do is I want to put my charcoal closer to the vent so that it has the air come in to be able to heat it up. And then the smokestack is on the opposite side. So as it comes in, it heats the meat and provides the smoke and then travels out. So we're gonna do a little offset. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put our charcoal here and we're gonna put our meat on the grill over here. That way, you're not putting your duck in direct heat. It'll be an offset heat. Therefore, you're gonna smoke it and slow cook it as opposed to cooking it at a higher temperature. Now, when we first set this on, we're gonna set for the first hour at a lower temperature. Like most meats that get smoked are at a lower temperature, but unfortunately with duck, in order to render the fat, you need to get up to at least 300 to 325 degrees Fahrenheit to fully cook it. So that'll be the last 2 hours. So in total, we're gonna be about three and a half hours on this duck here. You don't have to do the extra hour and a half, but I like to get the added smoke flavor. All right, now let's set the charcoal. So when you're doing your charcoal, you're gonna build yourself a little mound here, and then we're gonna use some lighter fluid to soak the charcoal chips. So what you wanna do is you wanna put a little bit around the whole pile, and then you wanna leave it for 10 seconds to soak in. The problem a lot of people have with charcoal is the fact that they put the lighter fluid on, and then they try and light it right away before it has a chance to soak through the charcoal. Should be tons. Now what you want to do here is you want to make sure that it soaks in, and you want to light it after 10 seconds. And then after, you're going to let it burn off for a little bit. Otherwise, you're going to have all that lighter fluid taste in your meat, and nobody wants that flavor. So you want to open this vent up in order to allow oxygen in and help the fire feed. All right guys, we are generating a decent heat source here. We're sitting around 200. What we want to do is put the turkey on now, let it get a bit of a cold smoke, get a lot of that smoky flavor in, and try and develop a smoke ring. And then after about an hour and a half, that's when we're going to put it directly over the coals, add a couple more coals, and get that heat up to 300, 325 degrees. So a couple important things that you really want to watch for. Don't open and close the lid too many times. You're going to lose the smoke, you're going to lose the heat. You want to close it and keep it closed as often as possible. The other thing too is you have your vent here. If you keep it closed, all the smoke will stay inside, but you'll also kind of kill it. You want to have it open a little bit to allow some smoke out. That way you're refreshing it. Otherwise you're going to get the same stale smoke. If you have it too far open, then you're not going to hold heat in, and it's just going to come all straight out. So I like to have it a little bit open, and then that way we're allowing smoke to really develop in here, allow the heat to develop in here, but not kill the flavor. Perfect. Second thing that we're going to need, very important, you want to have yourself a meat thermometer. You want to make sure it works, and you want to make sure there are batteries in it. If you don't have an electric one and you have the old dial one, you want to make sure that is calibrated properly. Very important with poultry that you want to make sure that you're getting to the proper temperature. Most poultry, like chicken, it's about 180 degrees, but with duck, because it's a migratory bird, same with pheasant and geese and quail and pigeon, you're also allowed to cook the bird at about 160 degrees Fahrenheit until it's done. You're going to do it on a more medium basis as opposed to fully cooked like a chicken. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to transfer the turkey onto the coal or onto the grill, opposite the coals. Like I said, offset. Okay, another thing that we're looking for here, you want to see that nice gray ashy kind of color. You don't want your coals to still be black. You want them to have that really cooked kind of look on it. That way you know that they're retaining heat and that it's not going to go out. So quickly, we're going to move the duck. We're going to use a pair of these guys and get that duck on there. Transfer. Put it sideways like this to make sure we're going to have an even heat and an even temperature cooking. There we go. So the reason why we do this offset and leave this grill open is because every half an hour you're going to want to add more wood chips, or sorry, charcoal or wood chips. And this way I don't have to take the grate off and on every single time, as well as if there's any issues during your cook time, you can access it way easier. If you have your meat laying directly over top, now you have to move your meat, you have to dirty your hands again, you have to dirty your utensils again, and if there's ever an issue, say there's a big fire, you're cooking on your animal and you are going to burn the bottom of it. So that's why offset is always optimal. The only reason why we're putting this duck directly over top of the charcoal later when we increase the heat is to make sure that it gets to that proper temperature. All right guys, I'm going to close this up and let it smoke. All right guys, very important here. When you're cooking with charcoal, what you want to make sure that you're doing is every half an hour you're checking on your temperature and you're checking on your charcoal. Things can go from bad to worse real quickly if you don't, but they can also be prevented. So if you come by and you check on your charcoal and it's still doing good, temperature's sitting the exact same as when you left it about a half an hour ago, don't keep your lid open longer than possible, but just take yourself a quick peek in, make sure that everything's still looking good, make sure that you have enough charcoal in there, and if you don't, then you want to add a little bit more. So you're going to add a couple of pieces every half an hour. I would say maybe a half a dozen. The more charcoal you add, the more heat you're going to produce, and the faster it'll burn through. So you can do it at a higher temperature with more charcoal, but you'll have to check it more frequently. If you have a few pieces and they're kind of spread out and they're all retaining a nice low heat, then you're fine to leave them for the half an hour. So let's take a quick peek. Perfect. So everything's still looking good. The duck's starting to get some nice smoke on it, and we still have a good pile. We're gonna let this guy go for another half an hour and then throw a bunch of charcoal on, crank that temperature up, and get it cooking. All right guys, now it's time to really crank things up. So what I'm gonna do here, I've already turned the duck around because now I'm gonna smoke the other side of it and make sure it's all real nice and even, but I'm gonna put a ton more charcoal in there. Let's really crank the heat up. You don't wanna try and add any more of the lighter fluid because otherwise all that flavor is gonna go into your turkey or into your duck and really ruin it. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna stack that pile of charcoal nice and high, open that vent, and keep things getting going. We are sitting right where we need to be. Nice, good stack of charcoal. Getting some good smoke on that bird. Alright guys, so we're getting kind of close here. I just finished adding a couple more pieces of charcoal to keep that temperature consistent around 300 degrees. What we're going to do now is we're going to use our meat thermometer and probe it. We're going to test to see in the deep part of the thigh and in the breast. We really want to check. Don't touch the bone, but you want to check deep into the muscle and make sure that it's sitting exactly where we need it to be. So you're going to try to do this as quick as possible. What you want an accurate read. You just don't want to let too much of that heat and smoke come out. So get ready. So it's looking real good here. We have good color. The charcoal's still going. We're going to put it in the deep part of the thigh here without touching the bone. So what we're looking for on this duck is about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. We are still climbing very gradually, but we're sitting around 130, 137, 138, maybe a little higher. So still a little farther to go. We're going to put it right into the breast here. And our breast is sitting around the same bit. So we're going to close this guy back up, let these coals keep working on it, and check in on this later.